Do I?
The Jeopardy
Well, we're a minute early, but I'm going to start it. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commissions in Platteville. We have one item on the agenda tonight, but before we get to that, I'd like to take a moment of silence for all of those men and women that keep us safe and sound. If we would stand and pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mary?
Chairman Rich Smith.
Here.
Steve Schaefer.
Here.
Sandra Smith.
Here.
Michael Kepper.
Here.
Adrian Sandoval.
Here.
Troy Blum.
Here.
Have we all read the minutes of our last meeting? Which was a while ago. I'd entertain a motion for the approval of those minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for the July 16, 2019 meeting of the Planning Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tonight we have audience participation. Now this is public comment items that are not on the agenda. You'll have 3 minutes, and not necessarily what you bring up we're going to be acting on this evening, but we will take under advisement. If we have anyone that cared to step to the podium, give your name and give your comments. It is 6:31. Crickets. All right, well, we'll close the audience participation at 6:32. We have one item on the consent agenda, and that is our last meeting minutes. Do we have anything to add or delete from those? Okay. We do have an action item tonight, 2 action items really. One is a public hearing concerning to modify the planned development zoning for a major subdivision approval associated development agreement creating vested property rights. It's the West Farm annexation out there. They want to amend it to take it away from real estate and put it into what would be the zoning?
Sand gravel.
What's that?
Sand gravel.
Yeah, for the sand and gravel, but I mean, what would be
We have planned development zoning.
planned development?
Mr. Chairman.
So, and this evening, I believe, we have the applicant's representative here, Matt.
Yep, we got 2 of us, Lynn Schultz and Matt Noteboom.
Holy cow. Both?
2? Yeah. Take this seriously.
Would you care to step to the podium?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry.
if I just may recommend that I would like to address the commission first for a few minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
And then turn over to Melissa Kendrick, town planner, and then to Mr. Noteboom and Ms. Schultz.
Okay.
Before the Planning Commission denies an application, the
presented by staff regarding the LG Everest and West Farm agreement, planning development agreement. I want to turn over to Melissa here in a minute to present her staff report and to summarize the application to the commission. I do want to briefly state that the West Farm annexation occurred over 10 years ago, back in 2009. It was a planned use development, primarily for residential, approximately 603 acres in totality. Over the course of the years, that developer did not pursue development of the property. And this past year or so, it was purchased by the company LG Everest. This time, we'll turn over to Melissa to present the application.
Good evening. It's been a while since I have been before you guys, so it's nice to be here. And we've been working pretty hard with LG Everest over the last couple of months to get this application ready for you this evening. And so I wanted to start a little bit with the location. It seems like we haven't touched on that, but I think you all probably know where West Farms is, but we're at the intersection of 32 and a half and 21. And that is an existing PD for the residential, as you indicated. And the request is in two parts tonight. One is the rezoning of that PD for the mining operation and a final plat that will support that mining. As background, the PD was a really mixed-use residential, and I think we look at that thing and recognize that with that zoning, we really changed the nature of that area permanently, even though it hasn't developed. And so what they're looking to do on it now is to allow the use of the property as sand and gravel mining with auxiliary operations, including maintenance facilities, related offices, concrete asphalt, and recycling. So pretty typical of what we see along the corridor in terms of sand and gravel mining operations. And LG Everest is going to be able to go into their operations in more detail with greater understanding. But the plans also include, you saw the land use plan and how the mining happens, and then there's the reclamation component of it. So as they complete, they will reclaim that, and there'll be water storage. So it's really, I was thinking about this, it's quite an unusual use. Usually when we rezone, it's commercial, it becomes commercial, and remains so. This really goes from mining into water storage in the long run. So, and with that is a final plat for 6 lots that are associated with that mining, partly based upon some of the road configuration, the lots are laid out, partly because there's an 8-acre lot that will be conveyed to the town as part of the land dedication. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But this application, these 2 applications have gone through the necessary processes. It was referred out to a number of agencies, and we got comments back that you have to read about in the staff report. Tried to summarize. What's important tonight for the Planning Commission to consider, and then the board, but when we look at a rezoning, we're looking at basically the area requested for rezoning has changed or is changing to such a degree that it's in the public interest to look at redevelopment. That because this has been known for over 10 years, that it was and hasn't developed, that it's indicative that another use is appropriate to be in this location, and there's a demand for the sand and gravel based upon construction in the region, as we are well aware of. So we believe it's an appropriate use for this location. In terms of the subdivision, there are a number of criteria that you need to consider, some of which is the water and sewer. This is a use that really, they will not connect to the town system. There's a well on site that will be utilized for some of the permanent facilities that are there on site, and for the temporary ones, like the temporary batch plant, the scale house, and things that move around the site, they'll use bottled water and porta potties throughout the mining operations. So that's how that will take place. There are a number of permits, mining permits, that they don't have now but will be required prior to operations. So this PD, this change in zoning, is the first step in our process. The second is a final development plan. So we will come back to you when they are ready to actually commence mining with that final development plan. And at that time, they'll have to have a number of these permits that are listed. And if you have questions about those, they'll be able to address those tonight. So those are some of the important things, and that takes care of a lot of the off-site impacts like the air pollution issues, the water impacts, and so on. Traffic will be a factor, and we are requiring a traffic study to be done with that final development plan. So that will be at the point they have plans that what am I trying to, more concrete in nature, and so that traffic study will be required. And at that time, there'll likely be turning movements, auxiliary lanes on 21 and maybe at 21 and 66 that will be required. County Road 21 is in the county; it's not a town road. So we'll be working with the county. We have referred to them and had conversation. We don't have any formal referrals from them yet. And the same thing with CDOT. So that will happen in the future, but certainly prior to any mining operations. Let's see. And we're talking about undue adverse effects. You know, that there's no way around the fact that a mining operation is going to have a big impact. One of the things that we have done is look at hours of operation, which are listed in the PD guide, which is associated with the maps, as you read, but where the hours of operation are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. There's some exception for some of the haul off, I think is the term, overhaul. And they'll go into like what that specific part of it is. We gave them a little more leniency around that a little earlier because sometimes they need to move material off the site, but it won't be as disruptive to the residents that are in the area. So that was a big consideration. There are not a lot of residents here, though maybe half of them are in the room tonight. So obviously it's a concern, but that generally is fairly dispersed, as you well know, out in this area. So let's see what else might be important. I think those are the big ones. I can answer questions as we get to that. But so our recommendation for the PD amendment is really based upon these findings and information in the staff report. Understanding that this is a PD guide with the maps, it's a PD. We're recommending the PD amendment subject to the attached resolution, which was part of your part of this report. And second part of the application is the final plat, and that includes the development agreement, also part of your attachments. So based upon these findings that I've gone through in the staff report, we're recommending the final plat favorably, also with the attached resolution. So I think that generally covers the big points. So I can answer any questions now or later. I know that Matt is available for a presentation, so I can talk to you a little bit more about their operations.
Yeah. I have nothing. It's pretty, the way it's laid out, it's pretty cut and dry. And pretty well explained and documented. I don't have anything.
With regards to traffic, will in future discussion, will we be putting restrictions on a haul route? Is that possible?
What I discussed with Matt Noteboom, who's present tonight, is the haul route would not go through Town of Platteville. Would not go down Grand Avenue, even though currently it's a truck route. That's been part of the discussion.
And we also have a truck route that goes 25 and a half.
25, 32.5 to 25 north is a designated truck route as well. From my understanding, most of the operations, I'll defer to Mr. Noble, that the traffic will likely go down 21 to 66. But I'll defer to him to speak to that. We haven't done a traffic
So
study yet.
if we put a restriction that there's gonna be no hauling through town, then there'd be no hauling to the east at all, right?
That still has to be discussed. Once we know the traffic analysis and where they plan on hauling, correct?
Well, that's a big concern going over our bridge all the time, because we gotta pay for the maintenance on that bridge.
Sure.
So that would be a concern of all the traffic going over that. So,
What's the capacity of that bridge?
I don't know that top of my head, but it's
Well,
designated as a truck route.
We, as part of the agreement with West Farms, was that they were gonna maintain that road.
They were to repave, which they did not do.
Okay.
LG Everest,
That doesn't include the bridge?
LG Everest is in the process of repaving that road, including part of the top of the bridge.
Okay.
They have a contract with Martin Marietta, and the board has addressed that during the last month.
Is that the paper that's sitting here?
That's the exhibit B.
if the truck traffic goes down Town Road 21, that intersection is very dangerous. So what are we gonna do?
That is a county CDOT referral.
So
I'm sure at the time, county and CDOT will address the issue with the safety of 21 and 66.
yeah, because that's truck traffic in there making that turn. They'll be going in that ditch on either side of it, and so they're not gonna have room to turn in there or out of there. So
That's not being decided tonight. That'll be at the final plan development.
Troy, do you think that because of the increased traffic down to 21 and 66, do you think CDOT would be a little more open to a street light there?
I can only presume. All I know is that intersection is slated for improvements within the next 3 years. The CDOT recently completed an intersection safety plan, and in our region, 21 to 66 is the highest ranked safety need. And according to CDOT, the people I've talked to, I believe the funding is available in 2023. Money in CDOT takes a long time.
The route and the traffic concerns will be addressed at the next meeting though.
The traffic analysis is required, and we'll address the traffic at that time, the
Before they
specific
start.
traffic at the time.
Right.
I think I was in that meeting in Fort Lupton when you brought it up to CDOT about a traffic signal at 21 and 66.
It's been an ongoing issue for many years.
Okay.
Yeah, so the development agreement tonight is with the final plat. It does, I apologize, I didn't acknowledge that attachment exhibit B is the cost for that improvement along 32.5. And it also, we made sure it also is clear that, you know, they'll have to meet any local, local, state, or county regulations for, which the intent was CDOT and the county and the road improvements, knowing that there'll be those off-site improvements needed when we get there.
is there gonna be one crusher operating at one time, or are you gonna have multiple crushers out there working?
I think it'd be best if we just defer to Mr. Noble.
Yeah, that would be a good
questions.
segue, maybe.
If we may.
Okay.
So I can't answer those questions.
Yeah, you can let him come up and talk now, or
Absolutely.
Step up. I didn't really prepare a formal presentation tonight, so I'm just kind of here to answer any questions that you guys might have on the operations. As far as the crushers go, we haven't designed a production plant yet. It's going to be dependent on how many annual tons we want to produce and kind of the market rate of what we see going on at that time. I think we've been pretty open as far as future production plans for this site. We don't anticipate being operational on the site for another 5 to 10 years. So there's going to be a lot of the planning, traffic impact studies, plant design, layout of the site that's going to be happening with the final development plan that we'll be coordinating with the town. So that'll be coming subsequent to this zoning meeting.
I know in the report here says you're expecting 20 years of operation. Is that typical, or do you think you might be done sooner with the?
You know, I think that's a pretty good conservative estimate of about what we're gonna be seeing with the existing plant site as it lays now. You know, future expansion or other properties that might be bolt-on that could extend it, but then if we did bolt on any other additional properties, we'd have to come back to the town and go through the re-permitting process with that. So you guys be well aware of that.
And you're expecting, somewhere in here I read where you're expecting traffic to be around 500 coming and going? 500?
That would be on the top side of traffic expected, correct.
500 what, I'm sorry?
Trucks.
Per day.
Oh, per day? So like how many a minute is that?
How many a minute?
Yeah, 500 a day?
Can't do that off the top of my head.
77.
From 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
The load out hours would be typically at some of our other production sites. They usually get started around 6:30, and most of that traffic is done by 3 p.m. on an average day. I think in this permit application we did daylight hours for load out. Mine operations, as far as crushing and screening and plant production, would be from 7 to 7.
Is that pretty standard in the industry?
Yes, most of our Weld County permits, where we primarily operate, most of our permits are through the county, and it's all daylight hours of operation and load out.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
What's that?
Can we ask questions to the audience? Yes. While he's speaking?
Yes,
That's what we're hearing. Yes, we can ask questions.
So if we could ask you to step up to the podium, Matt, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, he can stay. I
Okay.
just wanted to ask. So is there an environmental study? Have you already done that, like with the dust and, you know, what it's going to cause in the neighborhood? And have you checked on the eagle habitat along the river and the wetlands?
We have, as Melissa was saying, we haven't gone through the state DRMS permitting process yet. All of that will be taken care of through the state. Currently, with the town, we wanted to get the zoning right before we started that process of actually going in for the mine permit. So through the DRMS, we'll have to go through endangered species and wetlands and wildlife studies, as well as air permits and dust suppression and things like that.
And then will there be a noise study as well?
Yeah, there will be a noise study. And we won't be allowed, we just did one at another site, and they've got certain standards that we can't go above a certain threshold of noise.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. I think to clarify, tonight's meeting is, as Mr. Nobleman indicated, Melissa, is about the zoning and the approval of the revising the development agreement. The details of operation, the traffic, the environmental, the wildlife, the traffic analysis, those are yet to be determined. That's not on the table tonight to be approved.
And they cannot start.
And so they can't just go start mining. That has to be another process. As Mr. Nobleman indicated, they have to go through their state permitting process. They also kind of have to come back down to the final development plan, which will be within the next 1 to 2 years is what we're estimating. But that's an estimate. So I just wanted to clarify that. I understand the question by all means. I respect all those, but that is not a decision being made tonight on those details. This is primarily the zoning and changing the development agreement from the original annexation to their use with LGFers.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't have those answers because we're not at that point yet.
Well, you may not have those answers yet either.
Not yet, but they will be answered.
You have anything else? Thank you, Matt.
Of course.
I would entertain
Is there any other questions?
We want to
Close
check if the
public
public
hearing.
has any comments in regards to this.
close the public hearing at 6:54.
We should probably check and make sure nobody wants to talk first.
Yeah.
One more comment that I want to make is I totally understand what this meeting is for, is to change the zoning and that you're advising that the zoning be changed. But from our point of view, we realize once that is zoned, once you change that zoning, we realize it's only a matter of time, and you may think that some of these questions might seem inappropriate at this meeting, but we realize once the zoning gets changed tonight at this meeting, then we know what's going to happen. And we as property owners in this area feel like we need to be heard, because once you change that zoning, they're going to start mining, and we understand that. We know they have to get their permits, and they have to get all their licensing, and they have to do their studies. But, I just hope that you as commissioners understand what is really at stake once this zoning gets changed. The environment of this entire area is going to change dramatically. And you may not think it's going to affect the town of Platteville, but I believe that it's going to in essence affect the entire town and the neighborhoods surrounding the town. And I just hope that you will be mindful of that and consider that as you make your decision to change this entire property out here, which has been known as agriculture and a beautiful lay of the land. Once that mining starts, it's going to be a totally different ballgame.
Ma'am, what is your name?
Diane Herker.
Anyone else?
Said it all.
Well, we close the public hearing at now 6:56. And if nothing else, I would entertain a motion.
Can I just say one more thing regarding the existing development for this site was originally slated for, I believe it was approximately 2,000 residential homes. And I'm sure if there is an opinion of whether you'd rather have 2,000 residential homes out there versus a sand and gravel mine, but from our standpoint, the end use of this property with reservoirs in its final reclamation stage, long term, would be a better benefit to the town than 2,000 residents.
One thing that has been apparent through some of the other mining operations in the area is the reclamation can get drug on. They can just continue. The mining companies often continue with maybe a small little dab of land that they're still going to mine, thus postponing the reclamation for years and years and years, where it almost never happens, maybe in 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years. And I think just wisdom shows us that that's kind of what the mining companies have a tendency to do, which I totally understand, because then the expense of the reclamation does not come upon them for a very, very, very long time. So.
I don't want to get in the weeds here, so if this is an appropriate conversation, you can let me know. But LG Everest as a company has never bought into that philosophy, as well as the state DRMS has gotten more stringent on their disturbance areas of what the amount of area is allowed to be disturbed prior to reclamation. So that is changing, and LG Everest as a practice, we reclaim behind ourselves as we go. So it's a constant reclamation process. So you're not
like burn?
In the West Farms, we're not gonna go out there and bulldoze everything. It's gonna be primarily farmland until we get to that phase of mining on that next stage, so. It's gonna be a gradual process, and we do reclaim as we go behind ourselves. But I understand your concerns, because there are some operators out there that have gotten away with that for a long time.
Are we done with public comment? Did you close it?
I did, but I'm gonna reclose it.
Could I add one thing? I'm Richard Hergert, I'm Diane's husband. My big concern is 500 trucks a day for 20 years. That's a lot of trucks. Platteville doesn't want the trucks going through town. We don't want them going by our
We don't
house.
want to go next to our house either.
Yeah, I mean, it's just common sense to me that we need to oppose this, because I don't want 500 trucks a day going by with Jake brakes, and I see these gravel haulers. I've grown up in this area, so I know the impact that it has on our roads, and you know, what's in it for Platteville? What does the city of Platteville gain by putting a gravel pit in?
I can answer that question if I may. Part of it is the future water storage capability of Platteville. We did a water supply plan, and we are lacking on the amount of water that we need to sustain this community. So long term, 10, 15, 20 years from now, our plan indicates that unless we acquire significant amounts of water, we're not going to be able to grow. Part of this agreement is the first bucket, or the first pit that's dug closest to the river. The town has the first right to purchase that bucket for long-term sustainability and growth. That's part of this agreement. Also, the town, the public has never, to my knowledge, had direct river access to the South Platte River. It's all private land. Part of this agreement, right at the corner of 32.5 and 23, on the north side, there's an 8-acre parcel that's being dedicated to the town for public use. That the town will develop for public use to view the habitat, the geese, the kids can go fishing if they want, whatever the case may be. That's the first time ever ability to do that. And then on the south, 32.5 for a half mile is LG Everest has agreed during the plan development process to dedicate a 10-foot river access for a trail system. So those are some things. The water storage possibility is probably the biggest driving factor for the town, for the future. And knowing, and I'll be honest, I toured with Melissa at the LG Everest site north of Fort Lupton, which was a great site for me to tour. I'm not familiar with gravel mining operations because it had essentially the starting phase and the end phase. And Mr. Noboom showed me a bucket that I believe they sold to the city of Aurora that was full of water, and it attracts habitat. I mean, sometimes they stock fish in them. You're looking long term.
Sure.
Absolutely long term. My view on this application is I know the immediate is not the best. But I'm looking for the long term, 20, 30 years from now for my kids and my grandkids. And that's my view. That's only my view. But I just wanted to answer your question.
And that's what we're looking at too. Is
Absolutely.
our kids and grandkids.
Absolutely.
We've lived in that area for 45 years.
And we've developed that
We've
farm.
developed the farm, and you know, this won't add to the value of it by any means. So.
In time, I believe it will once this operation is done and that land has multiple water storage facilities. There's a 3-pond facility.
How many acre feet are you talking about water supply, water storage?
I don't know, Mr. Noble, is there possible acre foot? Not designed yet?
It's
That's
ballpark
fine.
10,000 acre feet
Per pond?
for the whole site. It's going to be on average 40 to 50 feet deep, and
Slurry walls as well.
slurry walls to eliminate influence to groundwater, and I'd say 75% of the surface area will be reservoir.
And then what are they going to be lined with?
It's a slurry wall, so
And
it's,
then the interior, it's just, there's no interior lighting.
no, the slopes will be reclaimed on a gentle slope.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
close public hearing at 7:03. And if there are no more questions, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution PC 2020-01, resolution recommending that the Board of Trustees approve land development zoning and final plat of the West Farm property to allow for mining operations.
Good second. All in favor? Opposed? Guess we're ready for your report, sir.
I really don't have much to add to tonight's meeting. I will advise the Planning Commission we will schedule at least one more meeting before the end of 2020. The purpose of that meeting will be to discuss some zoning changes in the residential estate and the ag holding zone districts. There are two of our rural zone districts, and the purpose behind that is to amend those to allow more of a farm or residential use that's already being used outside of the town of Platteville. Does that make sense? Because we're talking to people who are willing to annex in, but they have farm use properties. So we will ensure that we don't deter them from using their farm or their agricultural land as they currently are. But that's coming up in the next month or two. Okay.
Does the planning commission have anything else to discuss? If not, we'll stand adjourned.
Before we start the board meeting, take a 10-minute break. I think Mary wants to clean things up.
If I can say real